yes, media literacy is a great tool to end mansplaining because nobody should be the expert explaining anything to anybody. Everybody should be like, I know this information. What do you know? Let's put our information together and learn new things.
Gen Z and millennials, we're now the role model of this generation. So why would they put their tablets and phones down when we're glued to our phones and tablets? Which is why I always suggest if you want to change them little nuggets lives, you need to pick up a piece of print media.
Today, our host Rima is joined by media literacy advocate Kelsey Russell, who has gained close to 100,000 followers on TikTok by encouraging Gen Zers to pick up the newspaper again.
All right, welcome to my podcast, Kelsey. Thank you for joining me and taking the time out. And firstly, can I just say I'm a big fan. Like, I've seen a lot of your interviews, your TikToks, and they're also engaging. So how does it feel to be like this poster girl for media literacy now?
It feels great. It feels like it's something that I have been meant to do. So I've always felt like it's kind of been my duty to help people fall in love with learning. So I feel like being the poster girl for it is very fitting, and as well, I would say.
So how do your parents describe what you do? Are they aware that you're like this TikTok star now? And do they get what you're doing?
They would describe it as she is the brokest celebrity that we've ever met. That is how they typically describe what I am doing. So they totally know what's they totally know what's going on. My parents are very much on all vessels of social media. Even my dad had a Vine when it was popular. So they are very proud of me. I mean, my dad comes from a family of entrepreneurs. So he's really proud that I have found this passion and found a very unique way to monetize it, to make money, and to hopefully build a business in the future. And my mom comes from a family of educators. So she is just really happy that I have found a path, and also that is about encouraging people to do something positive and using an influence for good. So they're really proud, and they're just waiting for me to make some more money so they can stop calling me broke. That's about it.
So how are you planning to make money off it? Do you have any strategy?
Yeah, so of course, brand partnerships are one way. And then I'm also like a co-host on a kids' news show. But I would say the main way for me to monetize is looking long term of like, how can I turn this into a much bigger media company? Is there something like workshops I can offer? Is there something I can sell to people? But I don't quite know that yet. So I don't want to make a company and not know what the purpose, what the mission of it is. And then another way too is through, let's say you want to make a podcast like you're doing yourself and get sponsors. But of course, like you're doing, that requires a lot of on the ground work before you even get to that space. So that is a couple avenues to make money with what I'm doing. And then public speaking as well.
I feel like it's always a challenge when it comes to monetizing what you're passionate about. And the biggest thing I've noticed that we have in common is we both come from a family of educators as well. Like my mom is a professor and my dad used to be a journalist, which is why I'm now in journalism. And funny thing is, you studied socio, and that's what I started studying in uni as well. And then I made the shift to journalism because I got my student visa approved and I came overseas. So it all worked out for the best. So I'm curious, like how did you decide to become a media literate baddie, as you call yourself, or hottie? You know.
Like, okay, so that's a good question. I kind of interrupted you at the end, so I apologize for that. I would say that so I studied sociology because I was guided by my godparents to study whatever you enjoy and whatever is, because it's going to be easy and you're going to get good grades in it, like naturally. And I always knew I was going to end up like going to law school or some type of graduate program, business school. So I knew when I finished undergrad, I wanted a high GPA and I wanted to enjoy what I was learning. So that's why I chose sociology, because I love learning about people. I absolutely love learning about how our identities affect the way that you and I interact, the way that when I step into a hospital, Is it why am I feeling different when I get treatment? I love to know the why behind that. And so I got my master's in it. And I think that this is when it started the journey of media literacy, because I'm in this master's program of sociology and education at Columbia, which is an amazing school. Yet during the summer, I felt like I didn't know anything. Like I just felt like I had garnered all of this knowledge about how people work and I couldn't do anything with it. I was like, I need some practical knowledge here, which is what led me to start reading the newspaper, reading it again. And I think it was just a journey of me realizing how media illiterate I was. Like I was not interacting with news. I was not asking critical questions because I had this blanket of like shame that I didn't know anything that was going on. So I think that what really started it was my love for one, sociology and knowing how difficult it is for everyone to interact with information based on their social identities. Also coupled with, I love learning and I love bringing people on the journey of me learning. So I think it was just natural love for where people are, meeting them halfway, and also let's learn together. I don't ever want to feel like I'm speaking down to people. I want it to always feel like we're having a conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's always hard to make a start. Like it's intimidating when you're seeing all of these big stories out there. There's so much information, and you're like, okay, I feel dumb because I don't know what led to this story. So for
Mhm.
someone who's just making a start and they want to start reading newspapers, they have that drive, they have the curiosity. What publication would you introduce them to?
Okay, well, I would first say find a local publication. I would do a quick Google search and say local newspapers, local media outlets, because that is probably where you're going to actually find tangible information that you can do something with. Local news is typically right now where it is unfortunately because so many of them have been infiltrated and bought. But I would say that they do have a light mix of national news, but local news, it's not as daunting. It's typically more positive because they have a newspaper for community engagement, right? Like if they're printing really negative stuff, it might divide a community more. So I would say check out your local paper. And I think USA Today is in the United States one of the best papers to read when you're first starting out. It has a lot of pictures, it has a lot of colors. It doesn't use these big finance words like the Wall Street Journal uses or these 5-syllable words that everybody in the New York Times assume that everybody knows. And that's why I always recommend that one. It's a fun and friendly paper to start with. So USA Today in your local paper.
USA Today, got it. I'm going to start reading that paper because I'm more into like New York Times and a lot of
Yes.
the local publications here, like Financial Review and AFR and things like that. But yeah, I need to get
Yeah.
more into that. So
Do
I
it.
know in one of your TikToks, you also describe news as gossip and the drama. And I'm like, wait, how did I not ever think of it like that? Like I never thought of it as gossip. Like it would have made it so much easier if that's how I saw news, would have made it more, I guess, approachable, you know? So what is the biggest gossip you have come across this late or drama in news and that's been keeping you up at night? And you're like, what is this all about? Like, this is unreal.
Oh, wow. This is a great, great question. I mean, listen, one of my favorite papers is The River Reporter, and it's actually like a Gen Z journalist. I cannot remember her name right now, but she's the one who like sends it to me. And I love that paper because they go over all of the public hearings like in this local town or local city up in New York State. So that's my favorite type of gossip is like what is on the forefront of these small communities' minds, and it'll talk about how they got into an argument about like a new stoplight or this new tax that's going to pull away from our community libraries so we can fix the potholes. So to me, that's the real gossip is I am really able to peek into what matters to this community. And it also makes me realize a lot of our gossip is the same. Like, yeah, I live in New York City. I'm not from here, but the same thing is happening here. Like funding is being taken away from public libraries, going to things that actual people who live here aren't happy with. So my favorite gossip is reportings about public hearings town hall meetings, committee meetings, because they are arguing, and I like to watch people argue. I do. Or read.
Oh, I feel you. I feel you. I'm a big fan of Suits, so I get it. Like law and
Mhm.
courtroom drama and what's that
Exactly.
series again? It's something about murder and there's this black woman who teaches her classroom.
Oh,
What's that
how to
called?
get away with murder.
That's right. That's the one. It's got so much drama in it. It just gives me that vibe. And
It
I know in
does.
the same TikTok, just going back, like leading to this question is, you also talk about the importance for Gen Zers to be able to regulate themselves emotionally, because most of us are always consuming social media and we are always doom scrolling. There's so much information out there and we just don't know how to stop or how to make a start with news. So how do you make that connection between news reading from print media and emotional regulation, and how do you do that?
Totally. So it starts with just we're like a really, really anxious generation. And I think a lot of it has to do with it's a lot of stuff going on, but more importantly, like we're the most informed generation. So I think are the generation that has the most input coming in, and it leads us not knowing what to do with the output. So I think we end up sometimes just shutting down, like I'm not going to interact with information. So what I found is I was like, why am I not interacting? When I started reading the newspaper, I was engulfed. I was like, I suddenly care about everything that's going on in the world and I want to know more. And I would see the same article on Instagram and not feel anything at all. If anything, will make me feel disgusted about the world, not curious. And for me, what I realized the issue was is where I was consuming it. Like, yeah, Instagram is a social media app, but in one scroll, I see that genocide is occurring. The next is something about meal prepping. The next scroll is a trip I didn't get invited on. And then it's my best friends and I all hanging out. That is way too much to input and to actually be curious about what is going on during this genocide in the world. Like it's too much for our brains. So I found that when I read print media, it gave me a moment to actually deal with the input, and the only input being the information that I'm reading in the news. And then I could decide on my output. If it made me frustrated, I can go on a walk. If it makes me happy, I can call my friend and be like, I saw this article that reminded me of you. And I just didn't have that same time to process when I read the news on my phone. So that's where I really made that connection, is that when we see news on our phone, we don't have the capacity in our brain to emotionally regulate it. So we just push it away. Versus when you're dealing with print, you have to think about it and you kind of have to decide how you feel. And I think that that's something our generation really needs more of, is to slow down and also realize we have to slow down.
So going back to what you were saying about, emotional regulation, I feel like one of your techniques that you described in your interviews, which was a time blocking technique, it's really good, right? You need to block out time for the time, what time of day you're going to use to read news and how you're going to use the rest of your day. So what does that technique exactly involve and how do you master it? Like it's a skill, right?
Yeah, and it's a skill I have not mastered. I will be very clear. And I'm happy that you brought this up, because something has been very off in my life. And it has been because I have not been implementing blocking at social media. So thank you for reminding me that. The first step is to be realistic, right? Like I'm an influencer, so I kind of have to be on my phone. I have to check social media. But the key is really realizing, what are you checking it for? Like I'll go the process for myself. I'm really interested in looking at comments. I'm trying to see what people are saying, how they're interacting. So I don't need to check my comments throughout the day. I can just check them at 10 a.m. in the morning, 10 p.m. at night, and interact. And it's actually kind of a cheat code for your brain, because our phones and like likes and comments, they give us these little boosts of like serotonin. So if you save all that serotonin for like 10 a.m. and 10 p.m., you'll actually feel better about your interactions on social media. But that's just like a little psychology tidbit of that. But I think to master it, be realistic. If you're a person that needs to be on your phone a lot and check things, set as many amount of times as you need for it. set alarms. That's something that I used to do. Like when the alarm went off, that's when I get my TikTok time. And also be very deliberate about times you are not going to be on social media. Like when I was a lot better about blocking, thank you for reminding me. I had a big rule of like no TikTok when I'm out with my friends. Like that is not something that I can check. So I would say be realistic, make alarms, set times, and also create moments where you specifically will not be on social media or you will be doing whatever you're blocking for.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I struggle with it a lot, like knowing when to block out social media from your schedule, going back to your studies or your other assignments or your chores, whatever it is. I just need something playing in my background, which is horrible, but I'm working on it. I
Yeah.
recently came across this technique. It's called Pomodoro technique. Do you use that at
Yes.
all? That's
Yes, I used to use that when I was in school. I mean, I just finished school, but when I was like really like I mean, I've been a full-time student, but I feel like when I was not an influencer and a full-time student, I would use the method a lot. And I absolutely loved it because my favorite part is during the break, you're not supposed to get on your phone. Like you're supposed to go walk around. You're supposed to fiddle your thumbs, stretch, go, I don't know, do 10 jumping jacks. So I love that method because I think it keeps your brain refreshed. And I have a type of brain I get bored. Like if I'm working on the same assignment for a long time, I get bored. So I kind of just need to move my body to get back into it. So I love that method. I really do.
Yeah, I agree. Like it works, like at least for the short term, even if it's for an hour or something, I'd do my assignment for 25 minutes, take a 5 minute break and go back to it. It helps me ease back into the like load, whatever I'm going on. Yeah, and I'm interested to know, like I know you've been on TikTok a lot, but how come you didn't branch out to other social media platforms? Because a lot of my mates are in India and they haven't heard of you because TikTok is banned over there. So it would make sense if you were using like Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts. So I'm curious, how come you haven't branched out just yet?
I mean, honestly, my bandwidth, like the capacity, I think that managing multiple social medias is a lot more difficult and time consuming than I think people assume. So my answer used to always be after I finish school, I want to start branching out into other platforms. But in all honesty, I really feel like my content belong is meant for TikTok. I think it is meant to belong on TikTok because TikTok is a social media that older generations really struggle to understand the impact it has had in our lives. And I think when they see that there's a young person using a media tool like a newspaper on TikTok, they're like, oh, this app can be, you can learn from this. It's not a dancing app. So I keep it on there because it's almost for the shock value of people who are not in our generation. I think people who are in our generation get more of a shock value from newspapers still exist and probably keep scrolling. It's other generations that by seeing my TikTok, their thoughts about the app and the platform in the way that we use social media changes. So that's why I'm like married to TikTok. That's why I just feel like my content lives best on there. Um and maybe this is bad for marketing, but I'm kind of anti like having your stuff everywhere. Like I kind of prefer for my Instagram to be the space where you can see my personal life. Like you can see me feeling cute, you can see parts of my family. TikTok is where that newspaper content lives. And when I make a YouTube and decide what I want to do, that's where that will live. So I think of different platforms as little hubs, but I do think about audiences that I cannot reach because of TikTok. So I'm always thankful when it's like podcasts and interviews where people can see and hopefully find my content. But I think it is time to get into YouTube for that reason and the restrictions that TikTok has in certain countries.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I love that you see it as separate hubs. And I don't know if you've noticed, but TikTok also, like the comments that come up under TikTok videos, they're a lot friendlier and a lot less harsh as opposed to Instagram reel comments. They are like, oh my God, like people, like there's nothing, absolutely nothing with a probably a cooking video, and the comments are just
absurd. Like they're so bad. Like I can't imagine. Like even I don't know who, some politician said recently that if I were looking at comments like that, then I wouldn't be able to step out of the house.
Yeah,
It's
I
harsh.
agree. I agree that, I mean, Instagram, for some reason, I feel like their algorithm breeds like negativity. Like they are looking for negative comments to push. And so be it, however it works. I never thought about the negative aspect, but people are very angry on Instagram. And you have me thinking, when people ask me about like, do you ever get negative feedback? I always say most of my negative feedback lives when a somebody will interview me and post it on their Instagram, or the comments posted on that website. And it's people saying things like, this girl thinks she's revolutionary, she's reading a newspaper. Like, oh, Gen Z can read. Like, is she going to teach them this, that? So you're right. I don't really want my conscience somewhere
It's
where,
extremely critical. It makes you feel bad. Like after you've gone through the comments, it just leaves you with a feeling like somebody punched your gut or something. Like, oh my God, that was
yeah.
bad.
And I'm also
Ugh,
like, love Instagram, but it feels kind of old sometimes. Like, I love it, but sometimes
I agree.
I'm a little too young. I'm a little too young. But that's what I have to say about Instagram. And you will find cute pictures of me on there, and never find me on
Oh
Twitter.
yeah,
'Cause-
all your pictures are cute. I've
Thank you
done
so
a bit of
much.
stalking.
Thank you. And they will never find me on Twitter, like ever in life. I'm not, I am sorry, X. I have seen too many people get canceled. I am private and will stay private for the rest of my life.
Oh, I agree. I have a Twitter account, but I haven't even posted anything because I'm just scared that what if I get canceled? Like, what if I post this and next minute I'm the new J.K. Rowling? No, I
Hello?
can't be there.
Yeah. And I also think, I actually really like that you asked that question about different platforms, because I think it's interesting that we have like an expectation that creators should be across all platforms, not kind of
Yeah.
realizing the work that that takes to make a video that will do well on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube. It's like triple the content. And I think it works well for people who have people helping them. So I hope when I'm in a space
You
where
need a
people can
brand
help,
manager.
yeah, when I have enough money for like an editor and a brand manager, then that's when I would see it start to expand, but not this one woman show.
Not at the moment, for sure. And
No,
plus, you have to sort of, even if it is the same content you're posting out there, there has to be different hashtags and different formats and different ways you're presenting it to the audience. So it's a lot of thinking. You have to
it
repurpose
is.
the same video, but in multiple different formats. That's
You get
hard
it.
work.
You get it. You
Yeah,
get it.
absolutely. Now I went through one of your podcasts where you were talking about this date, right? There's this guy who asked you about GDP, and that's a concept we all know, we've all heard of the term, and then he goes on to explain it to you, makes you feel dumb for it, for not knowing. Like I've faced situations like that, and I just like I feel like there's that inherent misogyny that comes out of those comments, and you can just see it, but at the same time you don't really know how to respond. So do
Yeah.
you think this media literacy journey that you're undertaking helps you, and in the process the women who follow you, to shut down mansplainers?
Oh, I love this question. I love this question. And I would say absolutely. And you know what? I think men are very interesting. Masculinity is very interesting. And I often feel bad for them, because they are almost like, what is instilled in them is that they should know everything, and that they have to know everything. And if somebody doesn't know something, it's your job to explain it. So I'm very aware of like a lot of mansplaining. I don't even quite know if they know how ingrained it is in them. But I think the opposite of mansplaining is always staying curious and realizing that like you can be an expert in a topic, but there's always more to know. So I think that yes, media literacy is a great tool to end mansplaining, because nobody should be the expert explaining anything to anybody. Everybody should be like, I know this information. What do you know? Let's put our information together and learn new things. So yes, I totally think it's a way to combat mansplaining. And also another way to combat mansplaining is explaining it better than the person did. Like, if you really want to get, that's like, the nice side is that we can say curious. The other side is that I have knowledge as well, and I'm equipped to not only explain this better than you, but question you. And if you can't answer the question, you need to learn more. And I hope
That's
you
right.
do. You know, like I
That's our
hope you do.
motivation right there.
Right, right. And so it does, because the best question to ever ask somebody when they explain something is, where'd you get that information? Where'd you learn that? And when you're media literate, you're more comfortable asking that question. So like, yeah, I think media literacy is so tied to confidence, especially as a woman too, where like people really don't like us to be knowledgeable. It's very uncomfortable for them. But the more you realize you being knowledgeable is just more about your confidence. It's not something you should weaponize. It's not something you should think you're better than for other people. Then we start actually getting further. So I would say absolutely. And to all the mansplainers, please stop. We don't care.
Yeah. And interestingly, I've seen this like both sides of the coin, right? I've seen a lot of smart women, they know what they're talking about. There's a group of men who act like they're the smartest, they're the best, and they're going to mansplain everything to you. There's another group of men who know nothing about whatever's going on in the world, but you have to sort of dumb down for them. Like, say you're dating them or you know them, and they're like, oh, I don't care about what's going on in the world. Like, I see both sides, and I'm just like, I'm flabbergasted. Like, how does this happen? How are there people existing on both sides of the coin? And they're just so strange. They still make you feel dumb one way or another, right? So your
They
media
do. They
literacy
do.
advocacy is so important. Like, it's so important. I can't stress
It
this
is.
enough.
I know I can't stress it enough too. And I think it's all attached to shame. Like we all have cultures where when we don't know something, you are shamed for it. And a lot of times it like when you're ashamed, you can do two things. Like you can either take a path of like, okay, I didn't know that, let me learn more about it, or I'm going to make this person feel small so I can feel big. And I think that a lot of people end up in that second camp where they're like, I don't know this, so I'm gonna make this person feel small, or make them dumb it. I don't know. It's that's why media literacy is important. It's about confidence. It's about like the more media literate you become, the more you realize you actually don't know much. So just keep reading, keep learning. But yeah, I can't stress how important it really is too. It's key.
Yeah, I agree. It's important to learn, but one like struggle I feel like for a lot of communities, especially for those from underrepresented communities, is the accessibility of news, right? And I know you like stress the importance of college and school goers to pick up a piece of paper, use that as a tool to demand what you want to learn in schools or in your colleges. But institutions have also got to be receptive to their ideas. So, what can we as Gen Zers, as young people, do to sort of be more media literate but access news easier? Like, would you ever recommend, say, swapping Netflix subscriptions with a newspaper subscription or bypassing paywalls? I know you wouldn't say yes to that, but
Yeah.
just
No,
because of the financial aspect of it.
absolutely. You know, I love that. I never thought about, right, like how much am I paying for my Hulu and what would it look like if I pay for a print media subscription or a digital subscription? You know, I would say that one, we have to be realistic. We're not a generation that interacts with paper that much. So I understand that what I'm doing is a little bit niche. But I would say, honestly, older relatives, if you have older people around you, if you have community centers, if you have even like thrift shops, a lot of them will have local news inside. But I specifically say older relatives, and I understand that not everybody is in a situation where they're in communication with their relatives. If you have a friend who is, a lot of them have old newspapers. They keep magazines in their house. And I think the greatest thing about print is it doesn't die. Like a story that I read from a magazine published in 1970 is still just as interesting because it was published in 1970. It gives me a view into what the world was like at that time in that place. So I would say if it's not accessible, ask people around you if they have any print laying around their house. Can you use it? If they have a subscription, can we log in together? You know what I mean? If you're getting print to your house every day, can I maybe take the paper on Tuesday and trade you for a coffee? I think we live in a world so much where we think of things of like, I pay 10.99 for this. If I stop, I'll pay for this. But in reality, so many things are free. It just requires us to open our mouths and ask people around us. So if you aren't finding anything, I would ask your friends, ask your older relatives, ask your doorman, ask the man, like just ask people. People are a lot more friendly, but don't ask
Don't be
people.
scared to ask for help.
Don't be scared to ask for help at all. Go to,
Yeah.
I mean, just don't be afraid. I mean, literally don't be at all.
I just like noticed that I have like 6 minutes left of this meeting. Is it
Yeah.
because I still have two more questions to go through and I want to like take the time to finish? Is it okay if this meeting ends abruptly? Can I just create a separate link and send it to you quickly?
Send it to me and I'll hop on.
Okay, great. So my next question is, I know you've inspired a lot of people to pick up the paper again, including me. Like I now go to the local library and just pick up the paper and I can't annotate, but I take my pen and paper and I sit there and I'm like, I'm going to like process the news and write down what I learned today.
At
I've
least
been
it's
doing
not.
that. I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing that because I read it more online. But I honestly, like, the only reason I didn't do that before was because I was worried about the accessibility side of things. Like, should I buy this subscription? It was so easier when I was back in India and my parents were buying everything for me. But now it's me doing the work. So it totally makes sense to like ask for help.
Mhm.
So, in your opinion, what's your biggest success story? Like, you have helped so many people pick up the news again, newspaper. But what's your biggest success?
That's a great question. Wow. That's a really good question that I feel like I should have an answer to right now. Um,
I mean, it's
man,
okay not to have an
I,
answer. I mean,
but no,
maybe you're
I do have
still
to say,
thinking about
I
it.
I think I'm thinking about it, but I will say I think my biggest success as of now is really being myself. Like, if you meet me in person, if you've been friends with me, the energy that I have on the internet is quite literally the same. So I think my biggest success, honestly, is being myself and trusting that it will get me where I wanted it to get me. Um, and that my biggest success is loving what I do. Like, I love the jobs I have. I love making my TikToks. I love reading. So I think my biggest success is like being 23, about to turn 24, and like living the life that's like on my vision board that I'm looking at right now that I like made in 2021. I just think that that's the biggest success. Is that I still feel like I'm Kelsey, like through all of this. I don't feel like I've created some other persona, which I think is pretty incredible on the internet in this day and age. And that what I do on the internet has a positive impact. That is something I find very successful amongst all the noise of the internet.
That's so important because I love that you achieved what was on your vision board. That's great. And you have been able to do that in a grounded and positive way as well, because a lot of people let the fame get to their head and they're like, okay, I'm big now, you know, everybody knows me. And yeah, it's important not to let that get to you because you have to keep doing what you're doing.
That people are inspired by YouTubers sometimes than podcasters.
That's amazing. And what about in your family? I know your family had a great influence on your career as it's shaping it out to be. So, who would you say is your biggest influence on your career from your family?
Jesus, that's such a big question. And I don't want to call one family member out. Um, but I think right now my grandpa on my mom's side passed about a month ago. And I would say he is currently my biggest inspiration. He was an educator for about 60 years. He was a principal, but he was somebody who was not just an educator inside the walls of a school. He very much understood what it takes to nurture a whole student. So he would open up his home, he would bring clothes from home for students who might not have had the best home life. He opened his family to his students. So I think right now he is my biggest inspiration because he truly understood what it means when we talk about educating the whole child, like nourishing the whole child. Um, And also, like, I'm kind of a no nonsense person, like, when it comes to education as well. Like, I do agree in curiosity. I love it, but also, if you set your mind to something, you gotta finish it. Like, you have to do your best. And he was a no nonsense type of person. Like, he set the expectations so high so you could surpass them. And that's what I want young people to feel like, is like, you are so great, there should be no nonsense about it. Like, go hard, achieve your goals, and do your best. So I think that he's my biggest inspiration right now, and his name was Morris Lee Williams.
I'll look him up. Uh, I've had a great influence from my parents as well. Like they are big believers of education. And
Yeah.
funny story, but I sort of had the same journey as yours, but also not quite. So I finished my bachelor's in 2022. And
Okay.
after that, I started working full time straight away. So my parents were like, you wasted 2 years of your life. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, you didn't take up master's straight away. You wasted your time. I'm like, what? So in my family, it doesn't matter where I work. They do not care if I work at New York Times or ABC or whatever. What matters to them is I complete my education. Do you think your family
Yeah.
has a similar perspective on that, or do they focus more on sort of being an entrepreneur?
Mm, I think my family really cares about learning. I do think like they really do love formalized education. That hasn't been the exact path for all of my siblings, but the one thing that my parents are very adamant on is putting us in spaces to learn. And it didn't just look like classrooms. It meant travel, it meant internships, it meant camp. It meant reading, it meant, watching movies, watching television. So I would say that my parents really care about making sure that their children are always in spaces to learn, that their education always continues. And if you choose, I mean, I think my parents are very much like, they want you to go to college. They want you to do all the things that you can because they provided the means for that. But I think what is most important for them is, if you start something, you finish it. And if you don't finish it, the next thing you start, better finish even better. So I think that that is how they think about education, pretty much in terms of that. But I mean, they do love college, right? They love that, like, both my parents have postgraduate degrees. They both love the fact that I want to go get another degree, and they're supportive of it. But I think they're more supportive of how much I love learning than the degree itself.
That's important. Like they are taking like a holistic approach to how you want to learn and not just stick to this one route, that this is the conventional route and you have to stick to it. I love
Mhm.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
self-education is way more important than just picking up a degree and that's that and calling it a day.
exactly. And I think my parents are also very realistic though. Like, a degree opens opportunities, right? Like, when you have a bachelor's, when you have a master's, you are able to get into more doors. So they're very clear with, like, I suggest you just do this to open the door. Like, just do it so you can. My parents are very big on creating options. Like, that's their biggest thing, is that you never want to just have one thing in life. So if you get a degree, you have more options. So that's how their brains works, is all about options.
Like you need to have the opportunity, like regardless of whether you take it up or not, you should have that option. Yeah, I agree.
Exactly. Exactly.
So what are your plans now that you've finished your master's? Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you so much. My plan is to rest. Next week, I'm going home for like 5 days, and I'm so excited because I'm not going to do a thing, but literally be horizontal, and I very much need it. And my plans are, the plans kind of already started before I graduated. So I have my job at First Stop News, where I'm a co-host on a kids news show for kids 8 to 12 that comes out on YouTube every Thursday. I also have brand partnerships with folks like Microsoft, with a long-term election campaign with Mozilla, and some other partnerships in the work. And there's one more thing that I can't remember. Oh yeah, building out the podcast. Like, that's one of my like projects this summer, is really figuring out if, like, who's gonna take this up, or is it something that I need to do independently and hope somebody picks it up. But those are the plans for graduation, the short-term plans. And right now, I'm just kind of riding this influencer wave. I'm seeing what comes, and it's working now. So let's hope it keeps working.
Yeah, let's just go with the flow.
That's kind of like the area I'm in. I'm like, things are flowing, so I don't think there's a need to go seek more stuff. But I do hope in the long term to create my own media company. And I hope in the midterm, I think I was talking about creating some sort of workshop or experience for young people to experience media literacy in the enjoying and fun way that I have.
I love that. I love that. I'll keep a lookout on what you come up with. I know you're going to do great things.
Me
And
too.
yeah, I'll just stick around for that. Thank you for
I
joining me, Kelsey. That was great to have you. And I'd been looking forward to this chat for a while.
I I have to, and thank you for having me. I know you're up early too, so it means a lot. And you are going to go so far too, and I'm so excited for this episode and to listen to even more of them.
Now, if you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, make